at the Portuguese Beyond Borders Institute, California State University, Fresno. This one titled New Voyages of Discovery, thanks to the creativity of our good friend, one of our panelists, Katherine Vash. So the latest global achievements for Luso Americans in the arts. We're so happy to have you on board the Portuguese Beyond Borders Institute at Fresno State. And thanks to, again, FLAD, Luso American Development Foundation, for being such a strong partner of PBBI at Fresno State and everything that happens in the communities as well. And we are honored to have all of you on as participants here, and those of you following us on social media as well. We are gonna talk to the panel. We'll try to keep this to about 45 minutes to an hour. And any questions that you may have or comments, please send them to us. I'll also keep monitoring it on the social media world as well. We have, as you can see, wonderful panel here today. We have Katherine Vash, Jennifer Acker, and Jeff Parker. I'm going to ask them, each and every one of them, to take a couple of minutes to introduce themselves, and they would probably do a better job than I could, and kind of their connection to this Lusosphere and this project that is being put together. And again, I want to thank Katherine so much for affording us this opportunity. And so I shall start with Katherine, because she's well known in California, well known throughout the Portuguese American world, and as I mentioned last week, and I was one of our good friends on the webinar today participating, Anthony Barcelos, said, that he just had to say that he was a narrowly published author, because I said Katherine was a widely published author, but indeed she is, and so is Anthony, and she is really a towering figure in the Portuguese American literary world. That's, I think, the correct word to use, and a good friend of the Portuguese American communities. And she's contributed immensely to what it's like being Portuguese American of various generations, because Katherine has been able to tap into various generations, not just the immigrant, but first, second, and even third generations. Katherine, if you'll take a couple of minutes to tell us a little bit about yourself. I know that most of us do know, but maybe some of us out there in radio world or in the also in social media have just heard the name.
Well, thank you so much, my good friend Janice, because it's hard to top such a effusive introduction. My background, in brief, is that my father is from the Azores. I was very proud of it. My late father. And I grew up steeped in Portuguese American culture, and Portuguese culture, in particular, Azorean culture, a very particular stripe. And my father was a lifelong painter, and one day said to me that there were a lot of poets and historians in the community. He, in fact, had written a book about the Portuguese in California, and my parents wrote a Portuguese cookbook. And he said, but there are not many people telling prose stories. And I wondered sometimes if it's not a good thing to have, or rather, I'm very aware that my parents gave me permission to write as I wanted. My mother also is she's 93 right now, and she just reads constantly. So I've done novels and short stories, drawing heavily on my Luso American background. I've published 2 novels and 3 story collections. And we're here today, really, though, to celebrate my colleagues and friends here. Jennifer has published, or rather is the editor of a wonderful magazine called The Common, and has done a celebration of the Lusosphere. I'll let her talk about that because she commandeered it and was a huge help as a wonderful editor in helping me do the story that's in there. And my dear friend Parker, of course, runs the Disquiet program in Lisbon, which I'll let him talk about as well. But this is a kind of coming together, I think, of those of us with either Portuguese roots or a deep love of Portugal, connecting and finding what stories we have to tell and share with a larger reading audience. So that's a little bit about me and why I'm here today. So I will turn it over to the next colleague.
Thank you, Catherine. And so we will go to Jennifer, if you don't mind. Jennifer, tell us a little bit about the common. I actually just about 10 minutes before we went on, just subscribed to it for a couple of years and saw some of the great work. And of course, this edition looks lovely, and I'm looking forward to getting it. So tell us a little bit how you came to the Luso sphere, how you came to the Luso American world, and a little bit about how this project, and a little bit about yourself as well, if you don't mind.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here with my friends Catherine and Parker, and to be sort of immersed more in the Luso world. I am definitely the newcomer of this group to the Luso world. So my attention for a lot of my professional life has been on the Spanish-speaking world. So that's something that I know something about, but not so much the Portuguese-speaking world. So this issue, which yes, is hot pink, looks like this. Birthday cake on front and back because it is celebrating the Commons' 10th anniversary this year. But you know, I came to this issue through you know, friendship and collaboration with Parker. So you know, so he'll talk about Disquiet and the wonderful things that Disquiet has done, bringing people together, writers from all over the Luso world, and you know, providing this springboard for new writers of all kinds of every year in Lisbon. So I was lucky enough to go to the conference one year in Lisbon as a guest editor to talk about the Common and some of the work that I do there. And then we thought, well, let's collaborate and do a portfolio together, and let's, you know, use all of the Disquiet contacts and all the wonderful writers in that circle to do something, you know, to really focus on a particular linguistic region. So the Common as a magazine is focused on place. That's sort of the central theme, the central question that we're looking to answer is, how do our surroundings that affect us, very simply? You know, we are all humans in physical places, and while we may not be going very many places these days during the pandemic, we still all, you know, have bodies that are rooted somewhere, and those we have a lot of different kinds of place-based experiences. So that really is the mission of the magazine, and we have done a number of different kinds of portfolios, both in translation and originally written in English over the years. And the Luso one was our feature for this fall, and it has been really a wonderful experience reading all of the work and editing these pieces. So I think that's, yeah, I can sort of
Sure.
you know, stop there and we'll turn it over.
Well, and then we'll go back to visit the Common and talk a little bit more about the project and how you came to this group of writers. We'll talk about that as well, but we'll pass it on to Jeff. Same thing, a little bit of an intro, and of course, Disquiet is internationally known. So tell us a little bit about, for those who might not have been somewhere, I don't know where, and have not heard the name before.
Thank you, Denise. It's a pleasure to be here with Catherine and Jennifer to talk about this magnificent issue, among other things. I suppose my most salient connection to this whole conversation is the Disquiet International Literary Program, which shares a birthday with the Common. In fact, we both started in 2011. And we've kind of been, in a funny little coincidence, one of the early roving editors of the Common, Julia Lichtblau, Jennifer will remember, came to our very first program, and she was the one who told me about the Common, and I was just about to move to Amherst, so it was a very serendipitous occasion, I think. And some years into Disquiet's history, we began collaborating with the Common on our annual contest. They publish the poetry winner of our annual contest, who ends up coming to Lisbon, coming to the program. So the bonds there are very tight, which we're very happy about. And when Jennifer suggested this issue, it just seemed like a fantastic opportunity. To say just a word about Disquiet, it was started by myself and a group of writers, Oona Patrick, Luso American writer, Scott Laughlin, writer with some strong connections to Portugal through his mentor Alberto de Lacerda. The essential mission of the program is kind of threefold. It's to foster cultural exchange among writers from Portugal, from North America, and from around the world. It's to create a incubatory space for writings from the Luso American community, and it's also a very lively conversation about writing and writers from Portugal and the Luso world. So every year we end up with around 100 writers there in Lisbon. Our partners and our main partners in Lisbon are the Center for National Culture, Centro Nacional de Cultura, and FLAD, which was already mentioned. Unfortunately, we couldn't celebrate our 10th anniversary in 2020. And we really don't know if we'll be able to celebrate it this year, but we will celebrate it in Lisbon at some point in the future. So,
Indeed. So thank you, Jeff. And Catherine, a little bit about how you became involved. I know that, as you mentioned, a little bit about your bio and your father, and it's wonderful that you mentioned the book, which needs to be. We need to have a new edition of it. So it's a very pertinent book for the Portuguese American community, not just in California, but throughout the world. It's, I think, one of the books that should be, I've said this before, should be required reading by all Portuguese diplomats when they come to the United States of America, along with your novels as well. But let's talk a little bit about your how you became involved with Disquiet. I know you've been involved with it, and how you built that relationship.
Sure, I'm happy to talk about my association with Disquiet, but also to thank you, Denise, again for bringing up my father's book that was considered so important and seminal, as you say, not just about the Portuguese presence in California, which my father was an historian who meticulously did the research. And of course, Portuguese was my father's first language. So he used original sources and not just his own experience, and my father's very prominent in the Portuguese American community and wrote that book. And I have often thought, gee, I wish we could reprint that in some way, because it's long out of print now. He wrote it long ago. But I would say that, whenever I've tried to write a story, and I have done a lot of stories that are not, you might say, based on my Portuguese roots, but I keep coming back to it. Whenever I try to go down some other avenue, I keep coming back. It might be because I feel that who I am was steeped in Portuguese culture growing up, but also being a Californian, for instance. I've lived on the East Coast now for 17 years, but my, including the story that's now out in the Common, is based in California, just because that's what I kind of understand. I had relatives in the Valley towns, but grew up in the Bay Area. So that just forms my consciousness in a way. And honestly, Parker might be able to say better how I came to Disquiet, because I was invited to do it one year, and I have kept falling in love with the program, and am lucky enough that I keep getting invited back. The first 2 years were taught by my dear friend Frank Gaspar, who is also a prominent writer in the Portuguese American community, and so they're I think we traded off 1 year, and so I might have heard about it through Frank, and then got invited by Parker, and Oona Patrick, who's herself a wonderful writer, also I think mentioned me at one point to Parker and to Scott, and so I owe Oona quite a lot for that. But what makes me happy about going back to Lisbon every year is this first of all, just the sensory joy of being in Lisbon is impossible to capture just, by describing it. The year after my father died and I was there, the sounds that were in my ear, just walking through the streets of Lisbon, were the ones in my ear as a child from my father. And it just broke my heart in a new kind of wonderful, moving way. But what I've really loved about Lisbon is there's a license for that Portuguese attitude of in-depth look at the senses and this Baroque embrace of life that has really informed a lot of the kind of writing I've wanted to do. This is generalizing, but when I was in college and first wanted to be a writer, I tried to streamline my prose as much as possible. And then one teacher said, why don't you just write the way you tell me the stories about your background? And so I feel like going back to Portugal gives me that kind of wonderful license. The biggest joy I've had in the last couple of years is seeing the workshop I'm very lucky to teach, called Writing the Luso Experience, has blossomed into something that I don't think exists anywhere else in the whole world, which is the Lusosphere experience comes together with people who have different but shared reference points. There are Brazilians in the group and people from Canada, the diaspora that's gone to Canada more lately than, say, California or Massachusetts, which you know about, Denise. And there was students from Mozambique and Angola and Jamaica and England, and just this explosion of sharing our common differences, if that makes sense. So I would say that I've come to Disquiet with the sense of excitement that it's only the beginning of what's growing, with this sense of a more global look at what it means to be Lusospheric, if you want to say, in the world. So really the shout out goes to people who are, Jennifer and Parker are both incredible writers, but they also set up programs and magazines and systems where writers get to share this and grow their community. So really, I'm grateful for them and for them setting up these platforms. But I would say it's been a real honor to see how the Luso world has grown in Lisbon, enriched by not just thinking about Portugal, but really being there.
Well, fantastic. Well, well said. Jeff, a little bit in what Katherine mentioned. So tell us a little bit about this coming together of the Luso world, and how this has grown, as Katherine said, and how this is, developed in just what is a very short amount of time. I mean, we're talking about 10 years. How have you been able to coordinate all this and bring all this talent together? And it's just wonderful to hear that Katherine's workshop, Writing the Luso Experience, is so popular, because that is something that especially those of us in the Portuguese American community, and I should say the Canadian Portuguese or Portuguese Canadian community the same way. I mean, we've been trying to promote these stories, and these people who actually can create wonderful stories, such as Katherine and many others, and have a space, a kind of a safe space where they can grow and develop their talent. So tell us a little bit about how this quite came all together and these last 10 years, and of course this Writing the Luso Experience to me is really very, very important.
Yeah, well, I really, in a lot of ways, I owe it all to Oona Patrick, who I just met randomly at a AWP conference several years before we started Disquiet. And, Disquiet was just a vague idea in my mind at that moment. But I had a great conversation with her about Luso-American literature, which, to be completely honest, I didn't really know at the time existed. And she described to me what you just described to us all, that, there were these writers who were writing without much of an audience in that diaspora. And so and she's the one who gave me the names of Catherine Vaz and Frank Gaspar, who I immediately went out and devoured. I immediately went out and read all their work. And I thought it's just criminal that these writers don't have a wider following. So that really became instrumental in our thinking early on about how the structure of disquiet. For me, it kind of really made it all click, because you know, it was one thing to be bringing a large group of North American writers to Portugal to interact with Portuguese writers. But it was quite another thing if you brought along with you a bridge between those two worlds, which would be this workshop of writers writing the Luso experience, writers from that diaspora. All that said, with the exception of, I think, Oona's enthusiasms at the time, she's become, for my money, you know, one of the experts from the literary world on Luso American literature. But at the time, we really didn't know how many people would apply for that workshop. We didn't know what interest would look like. Vlad was generous enough to help us out with four fellowships, to be able to bring 4 people. But you know, so we were kind of thinking, okay, well, if we can bring these 4, we'll be really happy. And I think the first workshop had 8 or 9 people in it. And we felt great about that. But every year it's just blossomed. We get somewhere around 50 applications for the fellowships every year now. And, you know, some of those are repeats, but really the majority of the pool is new writers every year. And the workshop is always full, always full. You know, 9, 10, 11, 12 writers. So it's been fantastic to watch that happen. And Catherine's taught it, I think, 7 times out of the 9 sessions, or maybe 6 times out of the 9 sessions. She'll teach it again when we do manage to have our 10th edition. So the anthology, which you must know of, that Oona Patrick and Chris Larcoche edited, features a number of our alums. So
fantastic. And now let's transition a little bit to the common and bring in this special issue that I'm looking forward to getting it very soon. And I've already had the opportunity to read some online. You know, tell us a little bit more of a background of the common, if you don't mind, Jennifer. And then from there we'll go on into this issue and discuss a few things about it.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, as Parker mentioned, along with Disquiet, we launched in 2011. You know, I should say that we were based at Amherst College in Western Massachusetts, and so it's another reason why it was you know, it was wonderful not only to partner with Disquiet but to launch a Luso issue here is the robust Portuguese community that exists in Massachusetts. And so that was just you know, a nice moment of connection, and something that yeah, that we're happy about, and that is, you know, resonates for me as a resident of Massachusetts, that there is a, you know, Portuguese bakery not very far from here. So that all is yeah, is quite wonderful. And so, like I said, the magazine was founded with this idea of the preeminence of place and how important that is in all of our human lives, and also at a moment when the world is becoming increasingly digital. You know, it feels like now our lives are almost entirely digital, and so, we were sort of beginning to have that that feeling with the rise of social media. And so the notion of place for me personally became even more important. You know, I'm a very reluctant user of all things digital. And so to sort of create a print magazine that is a physical object that exists in the world as a counter to all of this digital momentum was also very important to me. So it takes some extra effort to keep a print magazine around, and to build that subscriber base and to create the income streams for that. We do have a wonderful partner in Amherst College which supports us partially. And we now run a lot of educational programs. So we employ a fleet of wonderful Amherst College students to help with the magazine, and then train them with editorial skills and publishing skills that they can then bring on in their lives post college. Another sort of important educational program that we do is a classroom program, something called the Common in the Classroom. And so that's where we provide a lot of free resources, which we have also done for this particular issue, for the Luso issue. We have a page of resources, and I'll try to drop that into the chat in a moment, so that people it's just bringing things together. That if you were teaching this issue in the classroom about the Luso American experience, or about the Luso world more generally, or just simply a world literature class and using this as one example, there would be resources there for you, and a particular subsidized subscription program for students. And our goal is really to make it easy for teachers to teach literary magazines, and in particular the Common, and to create that connection between students and really cutting edge literature, like what's being published today by the writers around them.
And this indeed, and I've looked through the teaching the classroom resources you have, and they're great. And I would call upon those who are listening, watching, to reach out, because it really does have some wonderful resources that can be used in the classroom. It's it's got a lot of the work done for those who are teaching literature. So please feel free to go in there and explore. And it'd be great to start teaching a little bit more of the literary magazines in classrooms. Unfortunately, from my perspective, that's not done enough. But I'm sure you would agree, obviously.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
but
Yes.
it isn't. I mean, we kind of just get caught, in the same game, of everything that's been out there forever, and sometimes we don't teach enough of the, as you call it, cutting edge, and some of the contemporary writers. It seems like anecdotally, one of the things that we've talked about, and I know Catherine's follow this, is in the Azores, for example, University of the Azores, where lots of Portuguese Americans have their roots, those in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, California, a couple other states, and just within, the Azores are a small archipelago in the middle of nowhere, but there's so many great writers there, and it seems like sometimes at the University of the Azores, they were teaching the same writers from 75, 100 years ago, and they weren't inviting the contemporaries who are creating lots of good literature to go to the classroom, to speak in the classroom, to be part of this, and that happens across the U.S. as well. Unfortunately, it happens a lot. And so a little bit about also how we come to this special edition. You have lots of different writers from different parts of the Portuguese-speaking world. So how was this process done? You have an excellent essay by Esmeralda Cabral about the hydrangeas, which I love. And so tell us a little bit how this process came through.
Well, once we had the idea, sort of, late one night, hey, let's do this, and we began thinking about it a little bit more systematically. We put out a call, of course, to all of our readers for submissions, but the Disquiet folks, Parker and Oona and Scott and the other people, and Catherine, and the other people who are involved in the conference, really spread the word among that community. And without that, we wouldn't have had a portfolio nearly so diverse and rich. So then it was really just a process of reading things as they came in, and working with authors on editing pieces, thinking about the balance of the issues, so that we did have representation from multiple parts of the Luso world, and weren't landing too much just in Portugal itself, but um, we're really trying to represent the ripple effects of the diaspora, of the linguistic effects of cultural longevity in places, as Catherine mentioned, from Mozambique and Angola and Brazil and Goa, and the many places that that Portuguese culture has touched. So of course we did want to really provide a nice balance there, and we had so much wonderful material that not only do we have the print issue, which we've been sort of signaling to that between these pages, but online there was a whole additional complement to the issue, sort of an embarrassment of riches of all of this this wonderful material. So throughout throughout October and November, and even into this month, we've been publishing interviews with translators, additional short pieces. You mentioned Esmeralda's piece, as well as a number of other sort of poems and essays that reflect additional aspects of the experience. So we really feel lucky to have been able to include all of that.
Indeed, it's a wonderful presentation of the Luso world in its totality, and that's what's great about it. You have this, the various countries, but also, as Catherine mentioned in the beginning, the diaspora. Sometimes, Catherine, and your take on it as well. Sometimes, when we look at literature of the Portuguese-speaking world, it seems that sometimes the diaspora gets forgotten. And, writers such as yourself, first, second, and even third generation Portuguese Americans, those who live in Canada now, a newer immigration, as it was mentioned, it's mostly basically immigrants or first generation, but also, quite a few first generation. Sometimes those are not included into the canon, let's put it that way, of the Portuguese creativity throughout the world. Projects like this kind of bring it and give it a different voice, correct?
I think that's true, Denise, and I would add that very recently I heard somebody say something that I found very instructive, which is that we tend to think of having mentors as the older, supposedly wiser person, and that's good. But this thing I read also suggested that mentoring younger is a good idea too. In other words, that I might look for a younger person to mentor me. And I think that that's where we are now in an interesting way. And not just because a younger person might be smarter with computers and the platforms out there, but because the community is growing, not in this monolith, not just first to second to third generation, but also the richer aspects of looking, say, at the Brazilian world, the African world, Goan, and even Canadian. At Disquiet, there are a number of students I've had who are of Canadian descent, or rather part of the diaspora to Canada. And I find that very instructive and educational. I don't come from that myself. It seems very similar, but it's very, very different. So I think that, growing up as I did in California, there was a sense that it was like an enlargement of the Azores, if you will, when I was growing up. And I think the attitude about what is Luso or Lusa has changed a lot. And so now the definition is of this wider embrace of, and to be ready to not be able to define what it means to be Portuguese. In other words, the pursuit of what that might mean and what that can mean is open to interpretation. And so it's not just recording known history, it's going toward what might be unknown history as well.
Indeed. And we have just about another 15 minutes or so, and the conversation is fascinating. We could continue forever, but I know that we all have things to do in this pandemic world. We go from Zoom to Zoom to Zoom. And those of you who have any questions, please put them on chat. Thank you for all the nice comments, and thanks to some. We'd like to bring, if we can try in a little bit, bring Oona Patrick in. She's one of the participants, and maybe bring her voice in to, in the final moments of this panel. And also, there was a question, Catherine, right before we go. The title of your father's book, I have it here. I just have to go look for it. But the title of your dad's book was "The Portuguese in California." Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, The Portuguese in California. And my father's name is August Vaz. And, it's hard to get a copy now. So this conversation is sort of an incentive for me to see if I can get that republished in honor of my late father. But thank you for asking. It's the Portuguese in California.
Yeah, it's a great book, and I have actually one of the original first prints, and in a beautiful cover, reddish cover, beautiful cover, and it was actually given to me by a friend before she passed, and it was from the Bay Area. I think there's a dedication from your dad to her on the book, if I'm not mistaken. So it's a wonderful keepsake. And from here, from my house, it'll go to the Fresno State Library, where it'll be kept forever, hopefully. A couple of other comments also. Well, our good friend Miguel Vaz wanted to say hello to everybody, and of course Miguel is Catherine's cousin. If he's not, he will be for sure Catherine's cousin. They share a last name, and Miguel has been a strong supporter of everything that's Portuguese, with obviously his work at FLAD. We thank him for all that he does. And I wanted to ask a little bit, Catherine, where do you see, in your workshops that you've done and your contacts, and I know people look at you, and just a quick comment from Anthony Barcelos: "Somos todos primos." Yeah, indeed, we are all cousins somehow. But where do you see this creativity, especially, since you've been doing the writing and the Luso experience for a few years through Disquiet? How do you see the young Portuguese Americans? You just mentioned that there's this mentorship that can go both ways, and so for those who are listening to us, for those who are watching us through whatever venue they're utilizing, what kind of words would you of encouragement to some young Portuguese American who's some maybe doing a master's program, maybe doing maybe still in undergrad, and wants to develop his or her writing skills, and talk a little bit about their story and their family story, but sometimes saying to themselves, well, maybe my story isn't, hey, is my family story really worth, diving into and using as a platform for creativity, or his or her community? Because there's been a lot of things in the Portuguese American community that's happened, as you've mentioned. It's not, just first, second, third generation. There are things that are intergenerational, and some of these stories are sometimes not told.
Well, I'd say you don't need my permission to do anything. I'm just speaking at large. You don't need my permission at all. But if you need it, you have it. Just write it down. Don't try to get it right. Just tell the truth. All the things you would say to a writer, write to the world at large, not just to a small faction, and do it. Begin. There is no such thing as postponing what you want to do. You just do it, and write it down, and learn all you can. Read and write. There's just the same advice you give to any writer. But I can speak, and you hinted, Denise, just a little bit at the fact that there's a reticence in the Portuguese American community to dare to write stories or to try to do that sort of thing. I had a father who encouraged me to be in the arts. So I would pass along his blessing if you need it. You don't need it from me, but if you need it, you've got it, not just from me, but from August Vaz too.
Well, that's a double blessing. And that's kind of, in hierarchies of the Catholic Church, that's like having the blessing from the Pope, having it from August Vaz. Jennifer, a little bit also in your world, in your editing world, young writers, not just obviously Portuguese American writers, but obviously those, but young writers in general. What are some of the things that you're seeing, and what are some of the pointers that you could give to them?
Well, yeah, like like Catherine, I would say go forth and do it. And that, and just to say that at the Common, we love working with writers of all ages and experiences and from all backgrounds. And it is, of course, particularly exciting for us to work with new writers and to help them launch their careers. So people who are maybe who have never published a story or a poem before, we get very excited about debuts. But even, but it doesn't have to be your first time. We're excited about about really, really working with authors to help launch careers. So I think that is something that we take very seriously at the magazine, is doing the kind of editorial investment in a piece that we feel like every author deserves. Every author deserves to have their piece read carefully by an editor and really invested in. And for the, as editors, we see our jobs as like both trying to hold up some kind of a mirror and say, this is what we are reading in this piece. What do you think of that? And that's what's coming across to us now. Sometimes that in itself is helpful to authors. But also, asking questions like, what people's intentions are for the piece, and then helping authors, reach those moments. We are, a lot of editors are also writers, and that's true of all of us at the Common. So we know what it's like to want feedback and to want to be taken seriously. And so that's the kind of relationship that we try to engage in. And and the other aspect of that community building are the other kinds of mentorship programs I mentioned, the teaching programs, the Common in the Classroom. We launched for the first time a virtual fiction writing course for high school students this summer, and had 20 high school students from all over the world join us. So that that sort of training for the next generation is something that we even as a small organization we can't have an enormous impact, but we sort of do what we can to keep that spirit of excitement about literary magazines and writing and publishing alive, and trying to urge people to find their own communities. So in terms of advice, to find the community that feels right to you, whether that's being a volunteer for a literary magazine or for some other kind of nonprofit organization, or working at the Fresno State Center, finding the community that feels right to you, and that you're going to find readers and friends and people recommend good books to you.
Indeed, and that was a great idea about the high school. I was just kind of thinking how it'd be great to kind of tailor that a little bit to all of the students who are taking Portuguese language classes and interested in Portuguese culture, and how we could do something, obviously in English, but we could do something about the Portuguese American writing experience. And that's something that maybe you just gave me an idea. Maybe we could partner up and do something with Fresno State and do something to tailor to the Portuguese American high school students, because there's about 20,000 of them, and we don't have hundreds of thousands, but there's about 20,000 students that take Portuguese at different high schools, whether it be Massachusetts, Rhode Island, in areas that there are Portuguese communities, not just in those areas, but also in areas like in Utah and Georgia. And so if we could, it would be a good way to promote writing, and to promote the Portuguese American experience, and to promote the Lusosphere edition of the Common, correct? Yeah, let's go for it.
Sounds great. We'll talk more.
Yes. Jeff, a little bit about Disquiet and the program, of course, as you mentioned, you couldn't celebrate last year, and who knows this year, things are not looking favorable anyway for big gatherings and international travel, and at least in the next few months, and who knows what will be up until the fall at least of 2021. But tell us a little bit about how, of course, and what Catherine was saying, how of course Disquiet has been very important for Portuguese American writers and obviously all Luso writers and all writers of all ethnicities throughout the world. But a little bit of you as a director and as an editor and as a writer yourself, a little bit of an advice and a little bit of some pointers to young Portuguese Americans out there.
Well, you know, I think that we live in difficult times, and I mentioned in the introduction here to this issue this comment that I heard the Portuguese writer Susana Moreira Marques say once upon a time, 8-9 years ago. She was talking about growing up in Europe at a time of European unification and how she just felt that borders were disappearing all around her. And, you know, nowadays, whether you look at Brexit, whether you look at North American immigration policies, we just have the reversal of that. If you look at the pandemic, where we've all literally been confined to our homes for months, you have the exact opposite of open borders. So everything's been closing down, and whether it's a you know, an issue of writing about the Luso sphere, or whether it's a conference in Portugal, or whether it's a Zoom conversation like this on these subjects, you know, these are the things that will open the world back up, and that's what we need to do. So I hope that as soon as we can, and even while we're still in this this interstitial moment while we're waiting to come out, you know, I hope that all the young writers have their eyes open and are ready to open up and make the next new thing happen, because that's what we're all looking for, the next new thing.
Indeed, yes, the next new thing, and one never knows where it comes from. So it's just those who have aspirations, just right, as all of you have said. Indeed, I wanted to mention a little bit. One of the attendees mentioned that I'd like to remind the Luso American writers and readers, especially in California, that we have a wonderful resource, which we do, which is the J.A. Freitas Library, now in Modesto, California, now part of the PFSA, Portuguese Fraternal Society of America. It used to be called the UPEC. Actually, Catherine's dad wrote about that in the book. And it's Catherine's books are there, of course, and it's a great place to visit when you're not in a pandemic. Indeed, it is. It has a lot of the history of the Portuguese, not just in California, but throughout the United States, and especially in the western part of the United States. Katherine, as we come to an end of this, and again, I want to thank all of you, and if there are any questions, please submit them. I want to thank all of you for taking time. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you, Jeff, for your project with Disquiet, for all your interest and your work and your dedication. Thanks, Jennifer, as well, to the Common. Obviously, special thanks for the Lusosphere edition, but for all the other work that you've been doing. It's very impactful, especially for young writers and for the world in general. The comment, Katherine, that Jeff made, you know, it seems like things have been closing instead of things, you know, opening from everything, as he mentioned, not just talk about everything that, in general, but, you know, from Brexit to the policy, immigration policy to, you know, to the pandemic. A little bit as, and we'll use your comments as closing comments, a little bit of writers in this pandemic. How do you see writing in general in this pandemic? It can, you know, sometimes a pandemic is a horrible thing to waste. I've been saying about that in the Portuguese American community because, and it's a different world, but, you know, we in the Portuguese American community in California have been changing immensely. Your writing has been a mirror of that change, and you know, people can go back to a lot of your writings, whether it be the short stories or the novels, and look at how the community is and how the community was, and so, you know, when you're in your dad's time, when he wrote that wonderful book, we were talking about, having 150 Portuguese halls throughout California. Many of them still exist, but the pandemic has changed. They will never be the same. After this pandemic, it kind of changed a lot of different things. So the community has been looking at different ways to continue its vitality in California and throughout, I think, the entire United States. So from your perspective, how do writers look at this pandemic, and how do you look at it, and what do you see for writing in these times and post? What's your take on it?
I'll echo what Parker just said, which is keep your eyes open, and our minds and hearts stay with us no matter where we are. And the idea is that one small room can be in everywhere, can be the whole world if you treat it that way, is good advice. And I think that this pandemic, if you want to look at it somewhat philosophically, it's knocked us sideways. We always know that anything can happen in the world at any time, but this is forcing us to operate in it with those rules. So how does this change us? I mean, the word disquiet itself seems to apply, and being unsettled can be a fertile ground for a writer, for people who think creatively. But I would say Parker's keep your eyes open is a good way to look at it. My husband and I both got sick with the plague. We both got sick. So it was just, we're mortal and we're all human. And so what does that mean? How does that inform or suffuse what we do? I think the emotions of who we are at any point in the world can suffuse how and change how we write. And being open to that is what's essential.
Thank you. And I don't know if I'm going to try, just as we are in the last few minutes, to bring in Oona, if I can, just for, we've talked so much about her. She's been, everybody's talked about Oona, and I know that we can't bring her in a video, but I'm going to try. Let me see if I can do this. I'm going to try to bring her in with the audio. And so I'll ask all of you just a little bit on there, and here we go. Okay, so here we are. Oona, hopefully you can hear us, and thank you so much. You're kind of the everybody's been talking about Oona, and I've of course have read you your wonderful writing and have followed all of your work, and so welcome. And I'd like you to tell us a little bit about your connection to this entire world that we've been talking about.
Hi, thanks so much for bringing me in. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can. Perfect.
Great. My connection goes way back for me to early 90s in Provincetown, and I ran across Frank Gaspar's little book of poetry in the public library, and it changed my life. And one thing led to another for me, and I never pictured anything like disquiet happening or all these connections coming together. But I'm thinking about for emerging writers or people just have a little bit of interest, look around your local community and see if you can find that one book that will do that for you. It might be for someone else, might be Jarita Davis, Shauna Barbosa, a Brazilian American writer. And we have now alumni spread out throughout all these Luso communities in the US and Canada, and they're doing reading series. And there will be someone in your local community who can connect you. And having just a few connections can just make everything, make creative writing. It seems like this small little thing that nobody necessarily encourages you to take on. It can become something so much bigger. So I want to thank everyone here who've worked in this, Jeff and Scott and Catherine and Jennifer now with the magazine, and Denise for your long-term work on it. What we've seen happen, we never expected. So thank you.
That's a great way to end it. Thank you all so much. Thank you on behalf of the Portuguese Beyond Borders Institute at Fresno State. Thank you to FLAT, the Fundação Luso-Americana para o Desenvolvimento. Thanks to all of you for all of your work. Thanks, Katherine, for suggesting this this event and for helping me out as always. Your friendship means a lot to me and to the entire Valley and the entire California. We treasure you as a Californian. You may be in the East Coast, but you're always a Californian to us, okay?
Oh, gosh, igualmente.
Thank you all again. Have a great day and keep on reading. And those of you young writers, keep on writing, please. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.